What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Troy Talk podcast. Today we are covering one of my favorite topics in all sports, which is college football recruiting, specifically USC recruiting. Now, we have a jam-packed show for you today, which will involve me going over every current commit, some brief thoughts about them, and a mini film review at the end of each commit. I'm not sure if we're going to do this episode in two parts, but we will figure it out depending on how long the show ends up going. We will also get to a few listener questions at the end, or intertwine them as we go. As a reminder, please follow and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify. Every download and listen goes a long way. You can also follow the podcast at Troy Talk Pod on Instagram, Twitter/X, and Blue Sky. All right, let's get the show started. So USC recruiting, number one class in the nation, finally feels like we're getting back to the USC of old, where we were just dominating recruiting, focusing on locking down California, which was a big emphasis, which we'll get into a little bit later. Currently 30 commits, quite a ways ahead of the next class at, I think it's Texas A&M at number 2. We've been the number one recruiting class for pretty much this whole off season, and I think that's largely in play because of Chad Bowden and NIL, which I think are also intertwined. So Chad Bowden, for those that don't know, came over from Notre Dame. He was the general manager over there, and really just the adult in the room now, knows exactly what he wants and knows how to get it. And I think you've also seen Notre Dame be very successful early on with recruiting because they focus on getting the recruits early. This sort of fade late, so hopefully that doesn't happen with USC, but I think that's why you see USC kind of jumping up to this hot streak in recruiting so early on. Usually we're used to USC trying to fumble in at the end and trying to get recruits at the end, but different strategy. We'll see how it pays off. I think another big thing is the money too. USC's always technically had money, whether it's the donors or whatnot. It's just having access to that money and having a plan to utilize that money, I think, has been the problem. And then, as mentioned before, the strategy, focusing on California. A lot of talent here that we've just overlooked in the past, and they've gone to Washington State, Oregon State, Boise State, those types of schools, and done really well. And we've kind of obsessed over Georgia and Texas and Florida and whatnot, especially during the Clay Helton years and the early Lincoln Riley years. So you'll see most of the recruits, I feel like, the big ones at least, are from California, and that's, I think, also helped with the momentum we've had this year. There was a listener question from Rob out here in Los Angeles. What do you think, where do you think we close out in the recruiting rankings? And is the current admin going to hold on to our guys? So good question. Where do I think we close out? I think it kind of just depends on the season that we have. If we have a season that's, where we want it to be, playoffs, Big Ten, championship, that kind of level, then I think number one's perfectly reasonable to attain. Now, if we have our kind of 8-4 season, like I predict we probably will have, then I think top 5 is totally fine as well. Do we keep the majority of our people? Probably, I would say so. I think it's more that the recruits around the country are going to hop onto those, Alabamas, Georgias, and we'll kind of go down, not because we're losing people, but because other teams are gaining people. So basically, if I were to give an honest answer, I think top 5. And is the current admin going to hold on to our guys? I think I just answered that. Yeah, I think they will. I think the way the NIL structure is kind of done this year with Chad Bowden, I think we've kind of made these people kind of convinced that USC is in their future. Their strategy of locking down people from taking visits to other schools has been, new to USC, and you've seen a lot of people shut down their commitments already. And I think the landscape of college football in general, you're seeing people shut down the recruitments earlier, and recruiting, 75% of recruiting is done before the season even starts, which is, vastly different than the recruiting of old, which I think it's kind of, there's pluses and minuses to that. I think I always used to love going to signing day, and there would always be a bunch of people signing on that last day, and it was super exciting. You're not going to see that anymore, but also getting it done before the season kind of lets you focus on the football aspect of the season, which is good. Good for the players and good for us. All right, so to start it off, we're going to go basically in order of their rankings. So the highest recruited rankings at the top, and all the way down to the lowest. Only 2 5-stars technically. We're going to start with Kenai Pepe, future left tackle, I think, of the USC football. 6'7", 320 pounds. IMG Academy. Was originally from California. He's the cousin of Kobe Pepe. And I think one of the most important recruits. 1, because we've struggled recruiting IMG Academy in the past. And 2, we've lacked kind of the future left tackle, cornerstone left tackle in the past. Really a lot of success. Austin Jackson, even Chuma Edoga, Elijah Vera Tucker. We've had good success on the offensive line, but really struggled to get those linchpins, those first round draft picks like your Penei Sewell and people like that. Josh Connerly is another example. Getting him and kind of creating the momentum that, like, hey, we're not going to let somebody with California ties leave, especially to your Oregons, Georgias, Miamis, Texas. That's very important. So just a little film review on him. Just bigger than everybody at 6'7", 320 pounds. There's not going to be many people that can line up with him. Really athletic, long arms. I think his technique needs a little bit of work, lacks a little bit of the bend, but you could see that just the athleticism for his size is just off the charts. I've noticed even when he gets beat initially, his recovery is incredible. So if you kind of teach him the technique part of it, I think he'll be a really good player. And I'm also, as we go, since I watched film on essentially all of these people, I'm going to kind of highlight who I think had the best film. These are in no particular order, but there were about 6 or 7 players that I just really enjoyed watching their film for whatever reason. All right, so Mark Bowman is next. 6'4", 225-pound tight end / wide receiver, if you want to call him that too, at a modern-day high school. So this is kind of an interesting one. USC was on the outside looking in with him. You know, Texas, Georgia were seen as the leaders. Obviously, they have really good history of producing tight end play, but all of a sudden, you know, with Chad Bowden and Chad Savage as well, they put a priority on Mark Bowman, and there's a reason why. If you watch this guy's film, probably my favorite film of this class, at least, you know, top 3, really looks more like a wide receiver than a tight end, has great hands, athleticism, and good yards after the catch, which we haven't really seen out of a tight end at USC in quite a while, but just the burst that he has, it does not look right for someone that size. Like, it's just incredible acceleration, running screens, deep passes, has exceptional body control, high pointing the football, turning his body to make good catches, and also loves the block, which is very important for tight ends. You know, he probably needs to bulk up a little bit at 225. That's not exactly a tight end weight. But if he decides to go the wide receiver route, which I think he's plenty capable of being a big wide receiver, you may see him at the 225 pounds. So just kind of depends on where we see him in the future, where he sees himself. I think right now he's kind of a hybrid. You can probably line him up to block a little bit near the line of scrimmage, but his strength is going to be catching the ball and getting him into space. I think Brock Bowers is a very good comp with him. That's what everybody was kind of comparing him to. And if he becomes even 75% of the player Brock Bowers was, USC will be in good hands, no pun intended. All right, next we have Talanoa Ely, 215-pound linebacker out of Kahuku High School in Hawaii. Originally was in Orange Lutheran, but moved for his senior year out to Hawaii. So he was a big one because he decommitted from Oregon and has basically been all USC after. I know the family was big USC fans kind of all their whole lives, and we're kind of bummed that USC wasn't recruiting him heavily. But I think with this new staff and Chad Bowden, you've seen them prioritize the people they should be prioritizing. He's the first big-time linebacking recruit in a while for USC. I think you've seen them strike out on a couple SoCal linebackers that went to Notre Dame, which is unacceptable. So big-time get for them. Violent, downhill, fast, rangy, athletic. So many adjectives for him. Really tall for a linebacker too, and has the ability to play pretty much any position. If you watch his film, lines up at Mike, which I think they might see him at USC end up being, but he can also play a little bit of nickel, a little bit of Sam, rush the quarterback from there. So having the ability to kind of move him all around the linebacking field is very valuable. I've seen him, playing really well against good competition, which is exciting to see, and shows really good IQ, which is needed for that Mike linebacker position, and good gap awareness, which I think has been lacking at USC for a while. All right, next is Samote Katawanga, 6'5", 240 pounds, defensive lineman out of Santa Margarita High School. One of the first, Gerard Martinez of the Peristyle and the Two-Star Recruiting Podcast calls him the cornerstone of this class, and the one that we would be losing to other schools in the past, but one of the first recruits of this cycle that got the momentum going for USC. Looks heavier on film than I think he currently is, so I think he lost a little bit of weight recently, but very strong. So lined up a lot as a 5 technique, but didn't really see a whole lot of pass rush moves. So we'll kind of see where he ends up being. I think maybe him slimming down might be him committing more to that outside rusher. I honestly saw, as far as on film, he'd probably be better bulking up and being a 3 tech and kind of just playing the runs and gaps and rushing the quarterback from there. But we'll see. Sometimes you kind of find a body type that works best for each player. I think we have enough, which has been a kind of a far cry from the past, where we don't need everybody to bulk up. We have a lot of weight, to put it lightly, no pun intended there, which we'll be getting into actually with the next couple of recruits. So Jamron Winfield, another one that I highly recommend watching his film. 6'4", 290 pounds, defensive lineman out of Richardson, Texas. I somehow stole him out of Texas. He was I hadn't heard much about him, and then he just committed, so it kind of happened really quickly. Extremely quick for his size, gets off the line fast. One of those has like a big bag of pass rush moves as a big lineman, and that plays inside, so that's always nice to see. One that can disrupt the opposing offense and get tackles for losses, which I feel like we haven't really seen a whole lot of with USC. And I know D'Anton Lynn focuses kind of on a gap scheme where we just hold gaps and do it that way. But having someone who can, get upfield quickly will be very nice. Kind of reminds me a lot of, for Trojan fans, if you remember Jay Tufele out of Utah. I think he was a draft pick of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Just a really disruptive player and very, very athletic for his size. So very excited to see him in the Cardinal and gold. Next one is probably one of the bigger names, I think, for the people that kind of follow recruiting. Tomahini Tapoule, 6'3", 320-pound defensive lineman at a modern-day high school, also known as Tom Tom. Another Oregon decommit along with Talanoa Ely, and has probably been one of USC's biggest recruiters since his commitment. I kind of liken him to, those college football nuts might remember Vita Vea out of Washington. Just a really big rugby-looking player. Twitchy, though. Similar to Winfield, can get upfield really fast, but just does not look like he should be moving like that at 320 pounds. So very, very strong. Doesn't get moved off the line. You see some clips of him even standing up at the line of scrimmage. Had a pick six or two in his highlight film. So that's pretty nuts to see someone for 320 pounds. Drops back into coverage pretty well. And also able to play true nose tackle, I think, if we need him to, which is something we've kind of lacked in the past. But I think you'll see him not kind of in a cookie cutter nose tackle role. You'll probably see him being moved around as his high school film showed. All right, Deshawn Redau is the next player, a 5'10" running back, 195 pounds out of Oaks Christian in Westlake Village, California. As I think you've seen in the past, USC struggles to recruit Oaks Christian, one of the higher rated running backs prospects in a while. Focused, I think, mostly on transfers with USC in the past, with Keontae Ingram, Travis Dye, Marshawn Lloyd, Woody Marks, the list goes on, which we've had success going that route, but it is important to kind of develop and show especially that we can keep a running back here in Southern California. When you watch his film, he's a slasher who loves to get upfield in a hurry, so not really like a quick running back per se, but very fast, and once he hits that lane, he has breakaway speed. Also good size, deceptively big, almost 200 pounds, and I think has room to bulk up. Reminds me a lot of Ronald Jones, which is a good comparison to have. Had a good career in the NFL and an awesome career at USC. So if he can be, anywhere near that, I'd, be very happy. All right, next is one of my favorite players in this recruiting class, just as far as film goes, but also just how good a player he is. Elbert Rockhill, a 5'10", 175-pound cornerback out of Akron, Ohio. Very important to get this recruit because RJ Sermons, who was another, probably I think USC's highest rated recruit in the cornerback position this past class, reclassified to the 2025 class. So really important to get someone of Rockhill's caliber. Has the potential to be an all-conference cornerback, and especially going all the way to Ohio to get him is very important. His first play, if you watch his film, he took it to the house. I think it was on offense, so he plays both sides of the ball, also returns kicks, which is really important to see a two-way talent in high school. I know Gerard, I'm gonna plug him quite a bit in this podcast because he's one of the goats as far as covering recruiting. Is very adamant that having a player in high school that can play both ways is super important and projects well into the next level. You even saw him play a little bit of quarterback, so having a player be the best at every position essentially shows that he is extremely athletic and has the athleticism to be at the next level. Also has really great ball skills, so when he actually played corner, just felt like he floated in the air, was able to read the ball in midair, and hustles. There's a couple clips where he was, chasing down running backs that had a huge lead on him. Really, competitive player. Anytime a 4 or 5 star recruit hustles in film, that means a lot to me because I know, he doesn't take his rating to heart and basically just says, hey, I don't need to hustle if I'm, everybody wants me and I'm a 5-star. So for that reason, he's one of my favorite recruits in the cycle. Next is Trent Mosley. He's kind of on my honorable mention as far as films you should watch. He's a Notre Dame legacy, 5'10", 170 pounds out of Santa Margarita High School. He's a wide receiver, kind of a scat back too. Plays a little bit of running back, a little bit of quarterback as well. Now playing for Carson Palmer at Santa Margarita, which I think you'll see a little bit of a pipeline developing there. We tried to kick the tires a little bit on his brother, who had a really good season out at Stanford last year, but he's now at Texas. Really good in space. Lots of screen passes, tunnel screens, flat routes. Just get the ball in his hands and he scores. He had 26 touchdowns this year, so the reason I was kind of pointing out his film, if you want to go watch it, it feels like he scores on literally every play. Whether it's as a quarterback, running back, receiver, kick return, he's just always scoring touchdowns. So scoring 26 touchdowns in the Trinity League, which is the best league in all of high school football, is very impressive. Not a very big guy, but just very effective, and just got to find the way to get the ball in his hands. Just looks effortless. Wouldn't really call him the fastest or the quickest or even the biggest, but he gets the job done and just is a good football player. So very excited to have him in Cardinal and Gold. Next is Luke Wafel. So this was one of the more recent ones you might have heard. USC, this was a huge win. You could argue his ceiling might be the highest out of anyone in this class. Winning the battle against Ohio State is something that we don't usually do, but it showed that USC has the finances to back up their recruiting hot streak, and getting him all the way out of New Jersey. As I mentioned, an edge rusher out of the Hun School in Princeton, New Jersey, so small school. Kind of reminds me in that regard of Brian Cushing, where he just looks so much bigger than everybody, and also from New Jersey. Another player comp, Nick Perry, for those that might remember, defensive end out of Michigan. Just a big individual that is super athletic. There's been a couple clips of him online of him doing windmill dunks. Just dominates every rep, strong hands, pushes people out of the way, plays both the pass and the run, but I think you'll see him be kind of more focused on rushing the passer. I think similar to kind of Tuli Palutu a couple years ago, where just really good pass rusher. So we've kind of missed that getting to the quarterback. Braylon Shelby and Cam Fountain, I think, have a lot of potential this year, but this guy's a true just rushes, gets to the quarterback, and gets sacks, which is going to be very important to have on this offense, especially when a lot of the other recruits are more, bigger bodies that kind of plug gaps and the inside. This guy's a true edge rusher, in my opinion. All right, next is Brandon Lockhart, 6'2", 170-pound cornerback out of Loyola High School out of Los Angeles, California. So I call him kind of the CEO of this class. One of the first recruits, I think all the way back with Dante Williams was still here. A local kid, very vocal on social media, but just a really good kid too. Well-spoken, good leader. If you watch his film, he's a rangy, willing tackler. I think with that size, you got to be. And a very good football IQ. So having him as kind of the CEO and driving momentum and getting those group chats going is going to go a long way in developing and keeping this class. Next is Sean Alston, 5'9", 205-pound running back out of Paynesville, Ohio. So a really good-looking player. 5'9", 205 has kind of been the mold of running backs, I feel like, of USC of late, with Woody Marks and Marshawn Lloyd. And that's my comparison for him. Marshawn Lloyd, just a powerful, quick runner. Not necessarily like the fastest per se, but just makes his mind up and runs over people. Tough to tackle. You might have seen him announce his commitment at the Navy All-American game last year. So he's been recruited for a while and hasn't wavered. So been really nice to see. Next is Braden Jones, 6'4", 250-pound edge rusher out of Mount Carmel High School in Chicago, Illinois. You don't really hear a whole lot about him, but he's been very solid in his commitment to USC. He's listed as an edge rusher, but based off the film, I don't see that at all. I see he's got to be like close to 270, 280. More of a 3 technique, just an absolutely massive individual with probably room to grow even more. Good block shedder is one thing I noticed, and good gap control. So not necessarily like a Jamron Winfield or Tom where you get up the field and get to the quarterback, but just really good at maintaining his blocks and kind of plugging holes, which is very, very important for a scheme, especially as I mentioned with D'Anton Lynn. Wouldn't be shocked if he even develops closer even to a nose tackle. Like he has that size and that frame. All right, next is Essen Taffa, 4'4", 305-pound offensive lineman out of Corner Canyon in Draper, Utah. So this one, he originally decommitted from Washington earlier on and committed pretty soon to USC afterwards. He's a mean downhill offensive guard. I think he played a lot of tackle in his film, but he's definitely a guard. You get that guy in space. He has incredible feet for his size. It just looks like a rugby player moving and just absolutely demolishes people. And especially with Lincoln Riley's counter run scheme, which you see their offensive linemen being asked to kind of move all the way across the line during plays. I think it'll be very, very important to have someone like that kind of leading, especially when Alani Noah probably graduates, I don't know, if, in a year or 2 years, he'll be kind of a good replacement. Next is Jonas Williams. So the only quarterback in this class, 6'1", 215-pound quarterback out of Lincoln Way East High School in Frankfort, Illinois. Yet another Oregon decommit. Stop me if you heard this one before. I hate to make comparisons to Caleb because I don't think he's quite on that level yet, or not many people are on Caleb's level, but he looks like him just in the pocket, his mannerisms, the size is similar, and really can make all the throws. Probably not as good at arm strength as Caleb. I had a really good showing at Elite 11 this past week. Good, as I mentioned, the ball placement's kind of what stood out to me, and mobile, not as mobile as Caleb, I wouldn't say. Wouldn't call him really a scrambler, though. I think one of those guys that you could tell can get out of the pocket. Kind of reminds me of Sam Darnold in that regard, where he's not like the most eloquent scrambler, similar to even Hassan Longstreet or Caleb Williams, but can get out of the pocket and get that extra, 10 yards and get the first down, which is very important in just today's modern college football. But yeah, excited to have him on board. Another big vocal recruit that's been kind of the linchpin in this class. A listener question, just since we're on quarterbacks right now, Denise out of Idaho asked about what's going on with Ryen Lions. Well, this is recorded on June 24th, and earlier this morning, Ryen Lions did commit to BYU. And Denise was asking this. I think she had a little bit more with the question. Was like, it seems like every week Ryen Lions was predicted to go to a different place. First, Oregon was in the lead, and then USC with a lot of his teammates being here and his brother. He made a lot of visits down here to USC during the offseason, but USC kind of just balked on it. I don't know if they wanted to play the waiting game on him or it was, some other reasons, but they just decided to recruit. I believe the name is Payton, blanking on the last name. 2027 recruit out of Louisiana is who they're focusing on because, as you might have heard, Ryen Lions is taking a mission, so he's not even going to be in this next class anyway. But moral of the story, he's at BYU. I think that's good for a variety of reasons. I think he's a good fit there, but also he's not at Oregon, which is good because I personally think he's the best quarterback, if not the best player in this class. A huge fan of Ryen Lions' game. Not to overshadow Jonas Williams, very happy we have him. I think he's going to do great at BYU, and I'm excited to see what he does. All right, next, speaking of Folsom, California, which is where Ryen Lions was from, Vlad Diakonov, 6'6", 275-pound offensive lineman out of Folsom. One of my favorite recruits in this class. Was hoping we'd see a tandem of him and Lions at USC, but might be the most underrated recruit. Really cerebral with his blocking, doesn't jump out of the page with like his size per se, but once he gets a hold of you, he sticks on the blocks. Very high IQ, turns his defenders the proper way, doesn't whiff. Not the biggest, like I said, but has a mean streak to him. Will finish a block. I could even see him at center. I think you'll see there's a couple players in this class that could play center in the future, but I think he has the ability to literally play anywhere in the offensive line, even left tackle if he really needed to. I think that's Kenai Pepe's position in the future. So next is Sean Scott, 6'3", 230-pound linebacker out of Modern Day High School, Santa Ana, California. So this is the Rob Ryan recruit. For those that don't know, Rob Ryan's the new linebacker coach replacing Matt Entz. USC seemed to kind of overlook Sean Scott before Rob Ryan was hired, but ramped it up, and Ryan made sure that he was committed to USC ASAP. One of the many modern day kids on this list, which is refreshing to see because USC's kind of struggled with that pipeline after dominating it for so long. Instincts for his size is off the charts. Really good in coverage is kind of the first thing I noticed. So I think he was originally an edge rusher, but I think USC sees him more as kind of a will linebacker and someone who can drop into coverage, but can also rush the quarterback a little bit. I think his versatility is something that Rob Ryan really likes. Looks like a really competitive player too. Effort is in every single play, whether he's in coverage, rushing the quarterback, chasing down a player. And like as I mentioned before, I love seeing effort in these blue chip prospects. All right, next is Luke Weaver. So another one of my favorite kids in this class, 6'3", 205-pound receiver out of Notre Dame High School in Sherman Oaks. Reminds me so much of Drake London in that he's just a dog. Really good after the catch. Really big kid too that I think has room to grow a little bit. And I've never been more adamant about a receiver since Drake London. I really think this guy has the potential to be an all-conference, all-American, and another first-round draft pick if he continues to develop. Just looks like a future NFL receiver. Jumps off the page with his size and speed. He's running like 10.6s at 205 pounds in the offseason with his track times, which is always good to see football players running track. He's a little raw on the route running, I will say, but has the home run threat ability, whether he just send him on a fly route or you ask him to do a tunnel screen or do a reverse or something like that. He has the ability to take it to the house. Definitely faster than Drake London, probably not as strong and big as Drake London because that guy was just an animal. Also reminds me a little bit of Brendan Rice, I think, with his kind of, not stiffness is the wrong word, but a little bit more upright running style and just ability to, take the top off of defenses. I mean, a combination of Drake London and Brendan Rice is nothing to sniff at. Really excited to see him and see what he develops in the future. What's up, everybody? I wanted to take a quick second to remind you to follow and subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you turn on the notifications, usually in the form of a bell icon, so you get an alert letting you know when the next podcast is. This will ensure you don't miss an episode. Also, I'm interested in a sponsor to plug during intermissions in the podcast. So if you know somebody who's interested, please let me know. Lastly, I'm looking to do a giveaway of some sort in the future. I'm thinking 100 YouTube subscribers or Spotify subscribers, whatever comes first. Maybe some shirts, hats, stickers, or maybe even a Joey Herrera trading card. Once again, thank you again for the support. Let's get back to the podcast. All right, next we're kind of getting to the 3 stars. So Joshua Holland, 6'2", 170-pound cornerback out of St. John Bosco High School in Bellflower, California. So as I mentioned, Bosco kid, that's been a place that USC struggled with recruiting recently. So nice to see getting someone on the board there. Uses his size to high point the ball really well, and I think sneaky athletic, but not too many highlights that I saw showing off his true coverage ability. So need to see a little bit more to kind of make a full judgment on him. A good SoCal kid with good size and measurables. You always want to take a chance on that. Next is Payton Dyer, 6 foot, 190 pound cornerback out of Duluth High School in Duluth, Georgia. Another recent commitment, was committed to South Carolina, decommitted, and pretty soon committed to USC, the real USC. Probably the one that took RJ Sermon's place, like literally numbers wise, because he kind of came out of nowhere. USC was kind of kicking the tires on him, and that I think once you saw a spot open up, he jumped at it. The first play, like this guy's film, highly recommend. Probably one of my favorite of the 3 stars. It's him pressing a guy in the slot and then getting an interception in like a picture perfect technique. So really just a competitive guy, plays with an edge, feisty. He's yelling at his teammates for not having good gap control or, letting up big plays. Really hits hard for his size. Kind of reminds me a lot of Jalen Smith in that regard. And as might have heard me say, Jalen Smith was one of my favorite players at USC in recent memory. Just plays way bigger than he actually is. Tackles, hits hard, is really good in coverage, can play all over the field. I could see him lining up nickel, even a little bit of cornerback and free safety as well. So I think USC got a really good one, and I could see him developing into a 4-star recruit in the future. Next is Roderick Tizino, 6'2", 175 pound receiver out of Opelousas, Louisiana. So small town Louisiana kid, basically replaced Cohen Brown, who decommitted from USC out of Texas, I believe, earlier on in this cycle. One of the few decommits, but really fast. I think faster than quick. Runs a lot of go routes on the film. So don't always love to see recruits just running go routes on high school film. I like to see, a little bit of twitchiness, ability to run different routes and kind of having multifaceted aspects to their game. But, other than the route tree seeming a little limited, I think he shows a lot of potential. He has good size for his speed. So a good depth piece, and I think has a good ceiling on him. All right, next is Madden Reardon. 5'11", 150 pound cornerback out of Sierra Canyon High School. I have a lot to say about this guy. 150 pounds, I doubt he's that size still, but one of the biggest knocks on him, and probably why he is a 3-star, is that he is 100, at least lighter. I think you need to see him get to 170, 175 to play, fully at a college level, but might be pound for pound the best player in this class. And I know that's crazy to say for a 3-star, does 150 pounds, but had double-digit interceptions with multiple pick sixes in the Trinity League last year. Or sorry, not the Trinity League, but Sierra Canyon, which is probably second to the Trinity League in caliber. Really, nobody else is having that production in California. So if he was, an inch taller and 30 pounds heavier, you'd probably see him, be a high 4-star. So if he has that same production this year, I don't see how he's not a 4-star going into next year. But really his instincts and IQ, like it always seems like he has eyes in the backfield, knows what the quarterback's going to do, and just an instinctual player, which I love to see. But he also has the ability to play nickel, boundary corner a little bit in his film, and free safety. So I love the versatility with him. I personally like him most at free safety, having that true center fielder in the background, similar to Kalen Bullock. Obviously, Kalen Bullock was much bigger, but just having that person that can, get those interceptions when you need them is very important. All right, next is Jamron Baker, 6'1", 170 pound receiver, Chatsworth, California, currently at Sierra Canyon, was at Los Alamitos. He might be USC's first commit of this class that's still with the list. He's dealt with a lot of injuries, so we haven't heard much from him from a production route, but solid all-around player. Nothing really jumped out as far as like the fastest guy or the biggest guy, but just a really good receiver. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like Kyron Hudson or like a Darius Rogers. But I think, he's made really good offseason strides from what I've heard, and he's been really loyal to USC, so he really wants to be a Trojan. So might need a couple years to get ready, but I think he has potential to be a contributor. All right, next is Canon Smith, 6'5", 260 pound offensive lineman out of Valor Christian High School, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is Christian McCaffrey School in Littleton, Colorado. So a couple things with him. Very close with Mark Bowman, so that's always a plus. Has the ability to play a bunch of different positions. He's very athletic, mobile. To me, seems like he's going to be a center. That's what he screams to me. Plays both sides of the ball too. So not the biggest guy, but really good defensive lineman as well. May have the most pancakes on film that I've seen out of anybody in this class. So very impressive on that regard. But obviously the competition is going to be a little bit different in Colorado. Next is Jake Johnson, 6'3", 290 pound, a defensive lineman out of Prosper High School in Texas. So I think very underrated. He plays at a very high level in Texas and is very successful at that level and very productive. Really has a mean streak to him. Classic, Texas defensive lineman. Plays actually a lot of nose tackle, which I don't think is going to be his position at the next level, although he is apparently 290 pounds. But just on film, he looked more of like a 3 technique to me. Gets off of blocks really well, good pass rush, good push, good motor. A little bit less twitchy than a Jamron Winfield or a Tom Tom, but I think will be a very, very good college football player, and hopefully that's at USC. All right, next we're kind of getting into the weeds here. Andrew Williams, 6'5", 220-pound edge out of Fremont High School in Los Angeles, California. So this one was one of the ones that you like, wow, USC's really focused locally now, because this was the type of recruit that USC was ignoring the past couple of years. Nobody really knew about him. Kind of an inner city kid that you think can blossom at USC. Really good size. I mean, at 6'5" as an edge, that's what you want. Has room to grow on his frame. Bit upright from what I can see, raw, which I think could be fixed with coaching, but you can't coach the twitchiness that he has. So I think different measurables than like a Uchenna Nwosu, but maybe a similar trajectory in his career. Nwosu was also, out of Narbonne High School, and another inner city kid that put on some weight and developed into an incredible pass rusher with a good NFL career. So if he does anything near Uchenna, I think we're in good shape. Next is Chase Denise, 6'7", 291-pound offensive lineman out of Cathedral Catholic in San Diego, California. Another low-rated prospect, but I think a lot of potential. I mean, 6'7", 290 is a great size for an offensive lineman. Actually comes from a Bruin family, but has been one of the more adamant USC recruits as far as, like he says, he's locked in basically as soon as he committed. So love to see that. Always love to see a kid participating in camps too. He's I think he even missed a couple USC events to go compete in camps. So love that. Needs a little bit more bend and needs to be coached up a little bit, but has had a really good offseason and been a very competitive guy. So always wants to go hit people and just get better, which we love. I think you could see like a comp, just a Chad Wheeler maybe, a really tall, lanky, probably a little bit heavier than Chad Wheeler was at the same time, but a SoCal kid that can develop into a future NFLer. All right, next is Taylor Johnson. Might be one of my, as far as films, I wouldn't say necessarily the best film per se, but one of the most fun films to watch. 6'1", 200-pound linebacker out of Cajon High School in San Bernardino, California. Similar to Andrew Johnson, the type of kid that USC was overlooking, the type of kid that would go to Wazoo or Oregon State, kind of like a Dan Henley, if those who remember out of, I think, Washington State and Nevada, who's now on the Chargers. Just a super hard hitter. Not the biggest guy, but basically truck sticks, hit sticks, everybody that he comes to see in the backfield or wherever it is on the field. I think that needs to be reined in a little bit. I think his discipline probably needs to improve with that, and his form tackling needs to improve, because that's not going to necessarily work at the next level. But you do love a kid who's not willing or not scared to get his hands dirty and mix it up with some players. I think if we kind of teach him up a little bit, and I think Rob Bryant's the perfect person to do that. I'm really excited to see Taylor Johnson. And I think you could even see him kind of in the box safety role, kind of similar to Anthony Beavers, I think. Just hits like a truck, local kid that I think you could see develop really well. All right, a couple more left. We got Malik Brooks, 6'4", 330-pound defensive lineman out of St. Pius High School in Downey, California. So, I mean, probably, as far as on the defense goes, the biggest guy we have. Really just great size and great feet for that size. But he's definitely raw, needs to be coached up. So a little bit of a project, but a good local kid that I think if, you can put him in the weight room a little bit, get stronger and faster, just eats up blocks. I think he could be literally the perfect nose tackle. Surprised he actually isn't rated higher. Just off of the film I saw, was very impressive in the film, and I think technique-wise looked pretty good, even for how raw he is. So I'm actually really excited about him. Shocked that he's rated as low as he is currently. And then last we have John Fafita. So 6'6", 350-pound offensive lineman out of St. Francis High School in Mountain View, California. So basically a clone of Malik Brooks, but just on the offensive side. Very, very big. The biggest person I think that we have. Very strong, pancakes guys when he gets, when he hits, but I think he needs to work a little bit on technique and flexibility. You feel like when you see him, when he gets a hold of you, you're not getting out of it, but it feels like the elite athletes at the next level could probably dodge his blocks, and you might see a lot of whiffs. So I think with losing a little bit of weight, just focusing on technique could go a long way with him. All right, well, that actually went faster than I thought it would, but hopefully you guys kind of got a summary of who we have as far as recruits. There's a couple that are still going, but the official visit season is basically over. So I think the future commits are probably going to be during the season. Hopefully we keep the majority of our commits. As I mentioned before, you're not going to see a lot of people committing during the season anymore. Just the way NIL works, they want to lock it up so that if you get injured, you still keep your scholarship, all that stuff. I think the class that I talked about today is going to be
the vast majority of the class. We might see a couple change their mind later, and hopefully USC has a good season. Because obviously, if they go 6-6, 5-7, kids will probably decommit, right? They want to be on a winning team, and there's no reason this team should be 6-6 or 5-7. So we'd be asking a lot of questions if that's the case. Now, if you see us going the opposite way, 10-2, 11-1, making the playoffs, you might see a couple people latch on, a couple higher rated recruits that are waiting towards the end to kind of who will offer the biggest pay raise and all that stuff. The class has the ability to be the number one class. It has the ability to get even better than it is currently, but it's just going to kind of all depend on the season upcoming. Either way, I think we're in good hands. USC's recruiting is finally back to where it needs to be. We finally have a plan. We have the money, and we seem like we have just a really good staff of recruiters that are also really good coaches. So hopefully we continue this momentum. I know the 2027 class, we're already focusing on that. So a lot of excitement for that class as well, and just hopefully we just see this kind of as the momentum booster for USC and to continue this as we go. Because, as I always say, or as I kind of always think, how recruiting is going is kind of like a barometer for how the program's doing. I think we saw Clay Helton struggle with recruiting in the past, and as a result, you saw USC struggle. Obviously, when Sark recruited Adoree, Juju, that gave us 2 or 3 years of just really good football. We won a Rose Bowl out of that. Hopefully, this is the first class that kind of gets that going, and we have a 2 or 3 year run where it's top 5, top 10 classes repeatedly. And you'll see the depth kind of develop, and we won't need to go to the portal as much. All right, well, I think that's going to do it. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we will see you again next time.